but you cannot buy love. And it's just not working. The grandparents of these people that killed in Hadera and Beersheba, the grandparents were illiterates who fought us in 48. Their grandchildren are more dangerous because they know us. They know our language, their mentality, our weaknesses. They're more dangerous.
Today, we're going to be talking about hate crimes. Welcome to Israel News Talk Radio's Tamar Yonah Show. I'm Rod Bryant, the producer of the show. Today, we have a very special guest by the name of Shalom Pollack, who was born in Brooklyn, that is Brooklyn, New York, to an Orthodox family of teachers and rabbis. He earned his Master of Arts in International Relations from the Brooklyn College, and afterwards, in 1973, traveled to Israel to do a year of studies at Hebrew University. It was in October of 1973 that Yom Kippur War broke out, and Israel was very close to being wiped off the map. Now, this event was a major factor in his decision to make Aliyah and move to Israel. After coming to Israel, Shalom worked on a print and radio journalist before becoming a professional tour guide in 1980. After 40 years of guiding Israel, Pollack wrote the book Jews, Israel, and Arabs, an observer's view of Israel's shifting society, which is actually inspired by the places that he had come to know intimately, and varied the varied people that he guided in the tours in 4 different languages. For example, Shalom also worked as a print and radio journalist and served in Israel Defense Force as a reservist for 10 years. His unique experience became invaluable in understanding the parts of Israel's societies that many people don't quite understand. He joins Tamar on this show to talk about the current events in the state of Israel and the spike of terror that has erupted in the nation. Tamar, it's yours.
Thank you very much, Rod. I appreciate that. And again, for anyone who has not been watching the news, Israel has seen an upsurge in terror. The first major one, killing 4 innocent people in Beersheba, was a brutal stabbing attack. I want to say this because people hear terror attack and they yawn today. But if you can imagine someone stabbing and stabbing and stabbing over and over again, an innocent victim, women, etc. And then another one just a few days ago in Hadera, 2 more dead and there were wounded. And we have to ask ourselves, we've been able to enjoy some relative quiet in terror. There's always terror attacks and attempts. Thank God we have a very good security apparatus here in Israel that's able to stop attacks before they even take place. But when they get through, it is a terrible thing that happens. And we have to ask ourselves, why is this happening? And what is the solution? Our producer, Rod, introduced our guest. So I want to welcome to the show, Shalom Pollack.
Thank you. Good to be here with you.
Okay, so as I said, we've seen 2 major terror attacks in just the last several days. And I want to ask you your opinion on what you think is the reason for this upsurge.
The reason is Jewish weakness. Jewish Israeli weakness, lack of identity. Identity is the key word. It is why I wrote my book. And I try to understand the dynamics of Israel and why we are losing the battle in this last generation or so. When I say losing to those who would replace us and would attack us.
All right. And so you just wrote an article actually that you posted and sent out on your email list. It was called Hate Crimes. And you write in there that after the terror attack, there was a rock throwing incident in the north of Israel in a Druze village. and they were throwing rocks at a mosque. Now, you wrote that people are worried now that there may be a possible Druze-Muslim vendetta. I want you to explain to our listeners what you mean.
Yeah, it's interesting. Israel is around 80%, maybe a little less today, Jewish. The rest are minorities. The largest minority are Muslim Arabs. And within that 20% is a small number, relatively, maybe 2-3% of Druze. Now, the Druze are an interesting group. They are Arabs, Arab speakers. They live in areas where other Arabs live, but they are not Muslims. They are Druze. The Druze broke off from Islam in the Middle Ages. They followed a man called El-Daruzi. And in Islam, you may not leave Islam. It's a capital offense. And so there's been friction between the groups ever since. In 1948, when Israel beat back the Arab Muslim armies, the Druze were watching to see who's going to be the winner. In fact, in the beginning of the war against the Jews and the Arabs, the Jews actually sided with the Arabs, thinking they would surely win. When they saw that Jews were doing well, they dropped out of the war. And they watched on the sidelines. And when Israel won, their leaders asked the new Israeli state to join Israel as equal partners. They like to go with the winner. That's the way that they do historically. And they've been loyal citizens. Their men go to the army. They're good soldiers. And just as Jews are in Lebanon and Syria and Jordan, they are communities there, and they're loyal to their country there. As long as the country is strong, then they're loyal citizens. And as long as Israel was strong, the Jews have been very faithful citizens. They knew they had a good thing going. And about this rock throwing incident, two of the people that were killed, there were two soldiers or police killed in Hadera 2 days ago. One of them was a Jewish woman whose family moved from France to Israel a few years ago. The other one was a Druze young man, also in the police. And the Druze, like the Muslims, are very traditional societies where revenge is very much a real thing in their life. In fact, it's essential in their lives, unlike the Jewish modern community. So it was interesting that a couple of days ago, just maybe yesterday, in Marar, which is an Arab village in the Galilee where the Jews and Muslims and Christians live together, a mosque was pelted with stones, and it's assumed the Druze did the pelting because they were upset that Muslims killed Druze in the Hadera attack. And of course, in the town where the Muslims came from, Al-Fachem, also in the north, there were celebrations about the killings done by their heroic sons. And so the Jews don't take that very well. And the old animosities between the Jews and the Muslims sometimes erupt. And this was another eruption. Where it will lead, we don't know.
So I want to just add in here for our listeners, just to fill in maybe some gaps in that the Druze are spread not just in northern Israel, but there are also clans of Druze in Syria. And the reason that it is important that Israel stays strong and that these Druze stay loyal to the state of Israel is because if they think that we're weak and that Assad from Syria is going to try to take back the Golan, he will then, if he's successful, he will then just slit the throats of all of those Jews that took Israel's side. So they want to be on the winning side. You have to understand that. That's number one. Number two, I thought it was quite ironic, Shalom, that if you've been watching the news lately, there's all the talk about, what was it, the Academy Awards, one of these award ceremonies, and Will Smith went up and smacked Chris Rock, the MC, in the face because he didn't like something he said about his wife. And you're talking about revenge, okay? And then you're talking about the difference between the Jewish mentality and Arab mentality and custom, and what's traditional. And the Jewish people are always trying to have courts of law and so many lawyers, right? And, you know, we always try to work things out. We're not a quote unquote, you wouldn't think the Jews as violent. It's not our MO, okay? But when you look at the Arab culture, sadly, there's a lot of violence going on there. There's a lot of honor killings. There's a lot of revenge, as you said. And, you know, we only go to war, which is violent, by the way, when we're forced to, when talking and negotiating and trying to work out problems doesn't work, and we're being attacked anyway. So then we have to go to war. But otherwise, we are not somebody who will just walk on stage and smack someone in the face. Okay, so enough of that. Let me go on to what you wrote here about the hate crimes, and that you had mentioned this just now too, that not only did the Arabs celebrate this murderous terror attack, but they were passing out candies in a celebratory fashion to the people in the street, drivers going down the road. They would stop them, hand out candies. And this is what we saw. I don't know if our listeners remember, but after 9/11, there is a Fox News report that's on YouTube still, I believe, showing the Arabs in the Palestinian Authority, who were supposed to be peace partners, handing out candy after they saw 9/11, the towers come down. They were handing out candies, celebrating, what is the word, ululating, la, 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 in happiness. And
also in New Jersey, wasn't it?
What did you say?
Also in New Jersey, I think.
Arabs, that I did not see. That's news for me. But we saw this happening in the Palestinian Authority. And I want to remind everybody also that as the Muslim extremists and terrorists are cursing Israel out, they're also cursing out the big Satan, which is America. So remember, Israel's just the canary in the coal mine. After us, first the Saturday people, they say, then the Sunday people, which is the Christians, and first the little Satan, Israel, and then the big Satan. So remember, it's not going to just stop here. If you tolerate evil and terror, it's going to eventually, God forbid, reach your shores. Okay, saying that, I wanted to bring up something else too, which I thought was very interesting. Ramadan is a Muslim holiday that is coming up at the same time as Pesach, Passover here in Israel. And usually during this time, the Arabs, the Muslims also get riled up and they start going on murder sprees, terrorist sprees. There is an article in the Jewish press. I want you to tell me what you think about this, Shalom. It's entitled, "Based on Islamic Prophecies, PA, or Palestinian Authority, Muslims anticipating Israel's demise in Ramadan 2022. And they're saying here that many Muslims are convinced that during the month of Ramadan in 2022, which is coming up now, which coincides with the Jewish month of Nisan and the Passover holiday this year, Israel will cease to exist. This is what they're saying. A collection of Islamic mystic forecasts, Quran commentators, and a prophecy attributed to Hamas founder Ahmed Yassin have many believing that the state of Israel has about a month to exist, or it would be even less now. So I'm thinking, if this indeed is a prophecy and they are hearing this by their imams in the mosques all the time, this may embolden them to even want to do more terror now, because they think that they're going to see the demise very soon. And in that mentality, you like to kick a dog when it's down. You weigh in, Shalom.
No. Yes, they like to kick a dog when it's down, for sure. And they can get very excited about these prophecies, for sure. No doubt many of them will. It's interesting that every year when Ramadan rolls around, Israelis, perhaps outside of Israel, get very nervous about Muslim violence. Why would a holy month bring with it violence? Why is that coupled together? It's not true with Jewish holidays. Actually, in in Europe for many, many centuries, Jews were very afraid to go near a church at Easter because of the accusations of that Christ killing. That was something that Jews suffered from in Europe for many, many years. Now we're in our own country and we fear the Muslims among us because of Ramadan. That shouldn't be happening, but it's the case. We fear for ourselves because their holy month of Ramadan is coming around, and now we see our ministers and police going to the king of Jordan and assuring him that the Muslims will have free access to the Temple Mount. Don't worry, Ramadan will take care. We'll make sure you're not dissatisfied with us on this Ramadan. Let's keep things quiet. I mean, we are guests in our own land, and this Ramadan thing just sharpens the case. And it shouldn't be that way, not from a theological point of view, certainly not from a national point of view. And we shouldn't be suffering from that, but we do. We're so nervous about Ramadan, the holy month of the religion of peace. And we, the majority in our own country, are so nervous about Ramadan. It's just not the way it's supposed to be.
How has government policy been possibly enabling terrorism? You had mentioned weakness, a weak policy, but fill in more blanks.
It's a long story. It started a long time ago and it's accelerating. It's going on for 150 years, ever since Jews began coming back to their land and rebuilding it. The Muslims, from a theological, cultural point of view, cannot accept an independent Jewish anything in this land. It's just against their religion, against their culture, against their everything. And the only way we survive here is by being very strong, like beating them when they attack us. And they do attack us, and they attacked us as combined Arab world a number of times. We beat them back time and time again. They don't try anymore. Our neighboring Arab neighbors who have tried to eliminate us for decades stopped doing that. Now the problem is focused more on those Arabs living very close to us and within us. The 1948 war was a war fought between the tiny infant Jewish nation of 600,000 men, women, and children that was born in 1948 against combined Arab armies around us and the Arabs within us. Now, in that war, the Arab armies were defeated. The Arabs within us who joined our Arab enemies, many of them left. Some of them stayed. The ones that stayed are the Israeli citizens today. They're the ones who are so excited when their heroes killed Jews in Hadera and Beersheba. And when we were very strong, when our identity was very strong, when things were very clear, they knew their place in that they enjoyed the fruits of Israeli citizenship, but did not act their frustration at losing the 48 war. Their frustrations are coming out clearer now than ever. It's accelerating. One of the milestones, with a number of milestones along the way, was why this is happening. The latest one is that the Israeli government, in order to share power, they invited the Muslim Brotherhood Party in Israel to share power with them. And they're lavishing them with gifts and with kind words. And this Muslim Brotherhood Party, which does not accept the Jewish state on religious grounds, is sharing power with the Zionist government, which is the first time that ever happened, all for political reasons. And that's another sign in the eyes of the Arabs of Israel that Israel really does not know what it wants, that they are craven, that they are soft, they do anything for power, they will bribe their enemies, they will placate their enemies, and the enemies smell blood. It's like a shock feed.
And to add to that, I guess I could say that they wouldn't want to do anything in response that would somehow anger the Muslim Brotherhood members of their coalition to say that they want out. They're going to leave this government because they can't tolerate Israel's response to the terror, whatever it is. And then their whole house of cards would come down.
Yeah, the fact that the Israeli, this current government is guaranteeing the Muslims that this Ramadan, don't worry, they'll have every comfort, every consideration. And what's the interpretation? Well, how do the Muslims see that? Weakness. They're running after us, begging us to keep it quiet. We are allowing from Gaza, from Hamas-controlled Gaza, where we're allowing more workers than usual to come into Israel to placate them, while they keep threatening us. And it's pathetic. If it wasn't so scary, it would be funny.
You know, to be fair, even without this government under the Muslim Brotherhood, when Bibi was in power, and so many people love Bibi, and I appreciate many things about Bibi, but I also can identify things that I do not like at all, many of his policies. And we were under constant rocket fire in the south of Israel for years under Bibi's leadership. Bibi was the prime minister for 10 years straight. And constantly we would absorb these blows. As long as people weren't killed, you know, we could tolerate the loss, so to speak, or the damage, until we couldn't anymore and had to do an operation in Gaza. But it's the same thing. It's that Israel wants to always keep things at a low simmer level. We don't want to escalate the situation by fighting back and taking out the problem, which is just removing the enemy. And that goes all the way back to 1948, when we brought, and 1967, when the Arabs that fled, we brought them back because we wanted to show the world that we're a loving people. And here, look, we don't want to displace anyone and come back. But that was a huge mistake. You want to comment on that?
A lot to comment on. From Bibi to 48. Bibi did a great disservice by allowing this problem to simmer and grow under his governments. He should have and could have done a lot more. I'll tell you, when he first became prime minister in 1996, 3 years after the crazy, terrible Oslo calamity that brought Arafat here and his terrorists, and you know the whole story of Oslo, Bibi rightly and eloquently criticized Oslo from the beginning. He understood, and he explained it very well, why it was a calamity. 3 years later, he became prime minister. What did he do? What he should have done is say, okay, this didn't work. Go back to where you came from. Collect the guns, kick them back to Tunisia, where they came from, and reset. He didn't do that. He shook his hand with a smile from ear to ear. He was playing games, playing politics. Very bad beginning, and it did not get better. He did a bad job. And this government is even worse. They passed another milestone. They actually allowed the Muslim Brotherhood to sit at the table of the government. As you said, how could you be serious about confronting Muslim anti-Jewish violence when you're beholden to a Muslim Brotherhood party in your coalition? And if he votes against you, you've got no government. And for these people, that's the most important thing. Control, government, power, unfortunately.
The media is another arm that encourages, in a way, terrorism in Israel. Do you want to go into that? Because you also yourself worked in the media.
Well, the mainstream media in Israel, much like the United States, has an agenda. Let's call it progressive, if you will. Left-wing, ultra-liberal, progressive, you know it. It crosses oceans. And that's where the Israeli media, for the main part, is. So there are no surprises there. They don't like Jews who are proud nationalist Jews, religious Jews. They don't like them. They make excuses for our enemies. And when a Jew stands up and says the emperor has no clothes, they try to shut him out. And it's much like the United States, from what I understand. And the Israeli media is a post-Zionist, post-Jewish media to a great degree. The elites in Israel today, academia, media, politics, arts, just are post-Zionist, post-Jewish. They don't want a Jewish country. This is a shocking thing to say. When I first came to this country, I never thought I would ever imagine this. I knew there were all kinds of Jews, but they all loved the country. They all be proud of being Jewish. They wanted a strong Jewish country, but I learned that's not the case. A good part of the government today, the official left part of the government today, do not want a Jewish country, and find every opportunity to limit the Jewish content in every way of this country. And they'll be happy if this country looks like London or Manhattan one day. And they are working towards that. And they've got a lot of power. They're not the majority of the people of Israel. The majority of the people of Israel are traditional, loyal, level-headed Jews. But there are a lot of power over their heads, especially the courts, who don't want a Jewish country. And it's a radical thing to say, but it's a conclusion I came to.
You know, several years ago, when Avigdor Lieberman was running, I mean, he still is all the time, but this was several years ago. I remember looking at their website, and it said on there that they wanted Israel to join the European Union. They took that off their website now, by the way. But, and I was saying, how could they want Israel? It was Yisrael Beitenu, Israel's our home, his political party. And I was thinking, how can they want Israel to join the European Union? Because forget that we're just not even on the same continent. But in order to join the European Union, Israel would have to cease to be a Jewish state. And we would have no control over our borders, which means that Arabs who are European citizens could just come right into Israel and take over. We wouldn't have the sovereignty that we have today as an independent state. And I was thinking, this is total, in my opinion, treachery. Do you have an opinion on that?
Well, he's an example of a person who is not comfortable with a Jewish country. He's talking about Lieberman, who came from the former Soviet Union and was successful in politics. He changes his politics with the political winds. He was once a very, very anti-Arab, outspoken. Today he's sitting with them and doesn't say half a word about them. But he is pushing for the influx into Israel of non-Jews from Ukraine today, non-Jews, because that's his base. His base today is mostly non-Jewish people who came from the former Soviet Union, who are not Jewish according to Jewish law, but came into the country because of the civil law. Won't go into that right now. But these people that came into the country, either they're not Jewish or they're 1/8 Jewish, and they don't really care about coming to a Jewish country. And the less Jewish this country is, the more comfortable they would feel. I understand that. And Lieberman tells them, I'm your man. I'm working for a non-Jewish country. I speak your language, literally, Russian. And I know you like to eat your things. I like to eat them too. The Jews don't eat the same menu you eat. We're not like them. Vote for me. That's where he's at. It's about political power. That's
and
where he's at.
Not just bringing ham, pig into the country for, the supermarket shelves, certain supermarkets, I should say, but also the marriage that there's
intermarriage. Yeah.
Yes, intermarriage. And this is a big problem. Now, Ayelet Shaked a couple of weeks ago was saying that there are plans to build, I think, 9 or 12 new communities in the Negev Desert, that's the south of Israel, in order to be able to absorb up to 300,000 Ukrainians. They call them refugees. First of all, you're not a refugee once you've left the war zone. So once they're in Moldova or Poland, they're not our problem anymore. They're already safe. So they don't have to come to Israel. Most of these people are not Jewish. There are no 300,000 Jews in Ukraine, which means that they would be coming here and diluting the Jewish identity of the state, intermarrying with our daughters and our sons, and making this state de facto less and less and less of a Jewish state. It's the watering down. And I'm wondering who is giving them money in order to do this. I mean, for our own children, they can't afford to buy a house in Israel. It's so hard for somebody just starting out. And now all of a sudden they find the means to be able to build 9 new cities or 12 new cities in the Negev for these Ukrainians. Oh, and also some of our younger citizens as well. Why didn't they do that before? Do you want to weigh in on that?
Well, it comes back to the fact that there are people in this country, not the majority, but people who have power, who just don't want a Jewish country. And they will be very happy to see, as you say, the dilution of the Jewish content of this country. That is their agenda. These are people with power, and who's going to pay for these cities? The Israeli government will pay for it. They'll pay for it. They have, just like they pay off the Muslim Brotherhood for political reasons, they'll pay for this for the same reasons. They want power, number one. They want 2 things. They want power and they don't want a Jewish country. Those 2 things.
They want Israel to be a state of its citizens, which would just swallow up, and there would be no Jewish state in the entire world. But in any case, the state has to be here in our land, of course, right? I want to go back for a minute to the media. I remember a horrid, disgusting situation where a terror victim's brother, his sister, was murdered in cold blood by a terrorist in her caravan, in her trailer home where she was living at the time in Gush Katif, when Israel had that in Gaza, when Israel was in authority there. And I couldn't believe it when the Israeli Jewish reporter or anchor leaned towards him and said, well, if your sister wasn't there in the first place, she wouldn't have been killed. In other words, legitimizing this murder because his sister was living peacefully in Gush Katif. When I saw that, I mean, we've all experienced this before, but this was many years ago already. So it was still kind of fresh. And I was appalled. I wrote in. I said, this is disgusting. This anchor should be fired. Do you want to comment on that? How the media kind of blames the victim because you shouldn't have been there. If you weren't there, then you wouldn't have been killed.
It's a very sad situation. It's very frustrating. I'll just remind you of another one. There's so many of them. The current minister of Internal Security, Bar-Lev, a very left person, no friend of Jewish tradition or Jewish settlement in the land of Israel. His father was also in the Knesset, and at the time when 6 Jewish young men were gunned down in Hebron, and I think it was 1989 or 1990, I think 89. And his response was, well, they shouldn't have been there. It's occupied territory. Hebron, the city of our forefathers and mothers, matriarchs, patriarchs, well, they shouldn't have been there. Politically, they were in the wrong side of the line. That's his father. So it goes back and it continues. Look, these people don't really care about, they don't get really all choked up when Jews die. They're much more upset. You can see viscerally, you can see it and what they say, how they say it. If a Jew attacks an Arab, very infrequently, they make a huge thing out of it. How terrible, how shameful. They'll all go to the Arab's house and they'll beat their breast. When Jews are killed, you see a far different reaction. And it's all part of this disconnect from Judaism, from the Jewish people, the Jewish land. They're disconnected. And it's an old story. It's an old story that's becoming more and more frequent. Actually, when the state began, 48, in the 50s, 60s, you didn't have this. It's just getting worse. The further we go from our Jewish roots, without roots, the tree falls down. And again, thankfully, most of the Jewish population of this country are not there. But people with power in the media, academia, etc., they make their voices known, courts especially. And it's a phenomenon called post-Zionist, post-Jewish, state of all citizens. That's what they're working for. And for them, A Jew who's proud and clear and strong about being a Jew in a Jewish land, this they cannot take. They have to destroy that person. So this Bar-Lev minister, he makes a huge agenda about removing young teens from hills in Samaria and young couples with babies. He'll send hundreds of police in the middle of the night to drag them out of their beds because they're in illegal territory, brutalize them. Those 400 cops should have been in Beersheba or Hadera, where Jews are being killed by Arabs. The priorities are totally upside down. And their feelings, their visceral emotions are not in the right place. They're in a totally wrong place.
You know, I want to say that the leftists, and I'm talking internationally, are, and I say this sadly as well, that they don't value human life. They don't value human life like we do. You see in the story of the Tower of Babel that people would cry, not if somebody fell off the tower and to their death, but if a brick fell, that they lugged up to the top of the tower. If a brick fell, they would cry. And you see it in communism, with the left in communism, that the individual was not important. It's always the collective. And they murdered millions upon millions of their own people through hunger, through killings, through disappearance, people who were disappeared and were never seen from again. They don't, and I say this sadly, they don't value human life like we do. And when I see the media, who is sadly mostly made up of leftists, and they can say something like that to someone, that, well, you shouldn't have been there, instead of understanding what it is to be attacked. I mean, everybody's going crazy over a slap in the face on the stage of the Academy Awards, but people are being killed. They're being terrorized. They have to live with the terror. If you survive a terror attack, maybe we can go there if we have time. I'm not sure if we have time, but it is horrid that they don't even have the compassion for a human being suffering, for someone who lost their sister, for someone who was hurt in a terror attack and is crippled now, or has to live in pain the rest of their lives because the shrapnel that entered their body can't be removed by the doctors. It's just too dangerous to remove it. So they're living in constant pain, or they can't work anymore, or they can't have relations with their spouse anymore, or for whatever other reasons or results that happen from that. It's a lack of compassion. And again, I want to say here that, you know, Ukraine and Russia, both of these countries have not only been bad to humanity by killing people, but bad to my people, the Jewish people as well. And yet I still have compassion for them, for the people who are thrown out of their homes, the people who lost family members or lost children that were soldiers or fighting for their country. I have compassion because I'm a Jew, because I'm a human being. And we need to have that and not lose that. And that's something I see that is not such a value, or very on a low scale with the leftists. I want to talk to you about solutions. How do we end it? How do we put an end to the terror once and for all?
First of all, obviously, by being very clear and very strong and uncompromising towards any even thought about raising a hand against a Jew in our land. We have to get very tough. And when we're tough, they understand it. That's been the history. It's very clear. When we rise up and do something, there's quiet until they think that we're not really so serious about it anymore. That's been the history. Not just of Israel, but I guess of the world. When it comes to people who want to do damage, that's what they understand. But that's number one. We have to, as a Jewish country, get together as Jews in a Jewish country, and not trying to dismember it in our identity. It's all about identity, and it's a long-term project. We have to understand. Take a pause and think, well, what's happening? Why are things happening? Where's our strength? Where's our weakness? We can have the best airplanes and the highest walls that we build, and it still doesn't stop this terror. So what's the answer? The answer is they have to know we won't tolerate it. We won't make excuses for it. The judge is not going to let them off light. The police is not going to, the police minister, I mean, it goes from A to Z. We have to change the whole disc when it comes to security and intolerance of anything, thought of hurting a Jew in this country. We're doing the opposite. We're doing the opposite. We're crawling to them. Ramadan, oh, don't worry. You'll be happy this Ramadan. Don't hurt us. Please don't hurt us. What kind of approach is that? Oh, please don't hurt us. We'll make you very happy. Hello? What is the message? They smell blood. They know how to expel thousands of Jews from Gush Katif and do it like clockwork. And when you expel Jews from their homes, that's considered moral and sophisticated, and it's okay. But to think about expelling 5 Arabs from their homes, that's a Supreme Court will sit for days. Hello? We have to make it very clear. It's a Jewish country, and with all that it means. You like it? Behave. You don't like it? Go. And we should help them go. That's the carrot. We should, instead of spending money on walls to hide behind, we should spend money on encouraging these Arabs who won't accept us since 48 and before. They don't accept us, no matter the Shangri-La they live that we created for them. Yeah, they enjoy it, but you cannot buy love. And it's just not working. The grandparents of these people that killed in Hadera and Beersheba, the grandparents were illiterates who fought us in 48. Their grandchildren are more dangerous because they know us. They know our language, their mentality, our weaknesses. They're more dangerous. Instead of pushing them into our universities in front of Jews, etc., let them know Jews come first in the Jewish country. You are our guest, we're not your guest. And say it unashamedly. And encourage them to leave. If you don't want a Jewish country with these new clear Jewish policies, you don't like the way things are going now, we'll pay you to leave. Long term, we have to separate. Separate doesn't mean we go or give away our land. Separate means they go. If they raise a hand, they go whether they like it or not. If they don't raise a hand, we'll encourage them to leave. If they don't want to leave with the encouragement, stay, but you better behave.
And behaving means just being a law-abiding citizen. You have your Ramadan. Israel's never stopped people from their own religion. You already have that enjoyment. And in fact, it's important to say here, Shalom, that I know you know this already, is that an Arab in Israel enjoys more freedom than any Arab in any other Arab country or Muslim country. They have more rights here in Israel. So
they've got a real problem. They've got a real dissonance problem. On one hand, they hate us. On one hand, they all think we took away their country. They live in that dream, that narrative. But they believe it. They feel wronged. Culturally, religiously, politically, socially, they feel wronged. And they're jealous of what we made. But they enjoy what we made. As you said, nowhere else is better for them. It's a Shangri-La on one hand. Other hand, they're deep in their hate. So they're frustrated. They don't want to go to Syria or Lebanon or anywhere else. They're very happy to be here on a material level, but they never gave up the dream of getting rid of us. It's not a logical thing. It's a psychological, emotional, religious thing. And that's not going to change no matter how many degrees you give them, no matter how much money you give them, no matter how life is. There's people who killed the Jews in Hadera. They live down the road in Fachem. They have palaces in Fachem. They drive fancy cars. Yet, they came in and killed Jews in the neighboring Hadera that employs these people, that gives them business, services. And the killers are heroes in Fachem. It's not logical. It's not going to change. Unless we make sure that they know we won't take it, that we're strong. We're doing the opposite. We have to go back and retrieve our Jewish identity and strength, uncompromising, and then there'll be less attacks. Will they stop hating us? No. Will they attack us again when they can? Yes. But as long as you're strong, they won't. And then we have to proceed to encourage them to leave. Because down the road, it's just not going to be good with them among us. They hate us, and we have to encourage them to leave. I don't say throw them out. Yes, if they're actively against us, throw them out, and all their supporters. If they're not actively against us, if they're keeping the law, fine. We'd like you to leave. We'll help you leave. You don't want to leave, stay, but behave.
In other words, when you say behave, everybody has to behave. Arab, Jew, law and order. That's it. You want to be a Muslim, be a Muslim. No one's forced converting you to anything here. You have freedoms more than in any other Arab Muslim country. And again, just law and order. Keep the law. Be a law-abiding citizen. I want to thank you very much. Rod, I want to bring you back on. Is there any questions from our listeners at all?
At this point, we have just a couple of comments here. Let's look. First of all, there is a question that is being asked. What about Ariel Sharon and the expulsion? What about the return to actually occupy or retake the Sinai, etc.? Will we keep shooting ourselves in the foot? What's your commentary on that?
Sharon did a criminal, terrible thing. Another milestone in the descent of the Jewish state. About going back there, well, yeah, that's Gaza, not all of Sinai. All of Sinai was given to Egypt in 1982. But if you're talking about Sharon and Gaza and the thousands of Jewish families that live there, obviously the Hamas in Gaza is dedicated to destroying us, so we have to destroy them. Not play games. We have to destroy them. We've got to return the clock back to when there was far less terror coming from Gaza, when we were in control. We've got to go into Gaza. And without talking about tactics, but we have to be back there. We've got to bring the thousands of Jewish families back to our land. And anybody there who doesn't like it must leave. And if you agree to live in peace with us there, you can stay. Although we'd like you to leave and we'll help you, we'll pay you to leave. But if you want to stay, stay. And but we have to make it very clear, this is our land. We're going to defeat our enemies. Yes, there is a war. Most Israelis don't call it a war. They call it a situation, but it's a war. They call it a war. They call it a holy war. We have to wake up and we have to win this war. And we got to defeat our enemies. And we have to expel all those that want to kill us. And bring Jews back there and bring life, Jewish life, back to that place the way it was. Right. No reason why it was stopped by Sharon. That was criminal.
Unfortunately, you make common sense, and that's a lacking virtue within the Knesset. Alex also has a question.
Before you go to the next question, I just want to add something to what Shalom and both of you were saying, and that is that if we did go back in there and take charge and take out the terrorist regime there, the people, the Arabs living in Gaza, many of them would be thrilled because they know what a corrupt, disgusting, horrible government they have. And when we get all of our information from our, to our security services, who are we getting it from? There are no Jews in Gaza to get this from. We're getting it from the Arabs themselves in Gaza that want the Hamas out. So there would be many that would be very appreciative of it. Go ahead.
They would be appreciative. They certainly do not like Hamas rule, but they do hate us. So they might be a quiet population. They might not make any problems. They might be happy with the way turn the clock back as it was when we were there, and they don't like the Hamas. That is true. So stage one, stop the rockets, stop the Hamas government that's dedicated to killing us. That's stage one. That's most important. But then longer term, that part of our land has to be developed for Jews. And of course, anybody who raises a hand or even thinks about hurting Jews must leave. And beyond that, like I said, make it make it worth their while, encourage them, give them the option of leaving us. But that's that's longer term.
Okay, Rod,
Yes.
second question?
Yeah, Alex has his hand up, would like to ask a question. So I'm going to ask you, Alex, I'm going to ask you to unmute. There you go.
So I guess I just want to say a few things quickly. I think for Gaza, what you need to do is treat it like Berlin was treated with the Nazis. I think that what you need to do is they need to open up the Rafah crossing, allow the civilians, give them an allotted time to exit through the Rafah crossing, and then you got to, again, treat it like you did Berlin and destroy the terrorists in there. Because if you don't do that, it's just a cycle. You know, they're going to keep building rockets. They're going to keep producing more terrorists. So that's my opinion on what needs to be done in Gaza. And I think with respect to the terrorism that's going on, there's no deterrence. If somebody commits an act of terror, I believe the PLO will give their family an allotted amount of money. Also, if the terrorist, for some reason, he survives his attack, he knows there's no death penalty in Israel. Also, the terrorist knows that there is a possibility that they will be freed from prison in another prisoner exchange. So, I mean, there's no deterrence in Israel, in my opinion, to stop the terrorism. There's none. And when it comes to, for example, other terrorist acts of rock throwing, I don't think that they carry a life sentence. So you have these young teenagers, some of them are men, that they'll throw a rock, they go to prison, and then they get even radicalized even more, and then they get released and they go back to terrorism and they kill people. So with respect to that, I don't believe there's any current deterrence in Israel right now for that. And then I think earlier there was a thing about Ramadan. Why is there terrorism in Ramadan? Well, the Muslims believe that Ramadan is when their prophet was outside meditating in a cave and he received his revelations from God. What the issue is that from studying some of the Quran, there's no possible way to achieve paradise unless you die in battle or someone you know has died in battle and they intercede on your behalf when you die. And they believe that if they commit acts of terror in Ramadan, they have a higher chance of attaining paradise than if they committed acts of terror at another point in time. So that's just my opinion.
Alex, we really appreciate that. We really do. We also have another participant and we're running close on time. Do we have time tomorrow for one more person?
Go ahead.
Rachamim, you're there. Could you unmute your mic and go ahead and speak?
Hi. South Floridians for the Safety and Security of Israel would like to order 3 copies of your book for our library. And we conduct rallies out in the community, pro-Israel event rallies. I have a question for you. Isn't it time that the IDF start shooting to kill and there should be some executions? Isn't it time for capital punishment to come on the stage? I remember when Ari Fuld was stabbed and how horrified we were here. Mayor Kahane was correct in saying they must go. What do you think about capital punishment, and what do you think about no more Mr. Nice Guy in terms of actual reprisals? Thank you. Toda Rabba.
Absolutely, every word. We do the opposite now. We encourage it. Unfortunately, we're doing the exact opposite. Arabs may want to go to heaven and meet the 72 black-eyed virgins on Ramadan, but it's a very clannish society. And if they know their family is going to suffer because of their ride to heaven, they'll think 10 times. So what has to be done, one of the tactics, is that if one of these guys engage in terror, then their family is kicked out of their village, out of their clan, to another foreign area in Gaza with different clans where they haven't got the support system. It's a very, very big blow to the Arab society to uproot one from their village and kick them out. That the people who are thinking of killing Jews will think 10 times because of that. Another thing is the British used against Muslims in other parts of the world. They buried Muslim terrorists in pigskins. Now, if I'm correct, according to their tradition, a person buried in a pigskin doesn't go to heaven. The British used that and it worked. Let's do it.
They used to also put the bullets, like grease it up with pig grease.
Right.
With lard.
I mean, these things may sound silly to us, but if it works, hey, save a Jewish life.
Interesting. Well, listen, we all pray for peace, that we should be able to live together as God wants us to in the times of the Messiah. We're all going to realize that there's one God, that we're all connected, that it doesn't pay for the hand to beat the toes, because the fingers can write concertos and it can play the piano and write poetry, and look at those stubby, smelly toes. They're just a waste for the body, and it takes a sledgehammer and bangs them, right? But we're all part of the one, our Creator, and we all want to live in peace together. We're all brothers and sisters from Noah and even before to Adam and Eve. We're all brothers and sisters. We should live in peace together, appreciate our differences, celebrate them, visit each other's cultures and countries, and be good children to God. And that's how we all want it to be. That's how Israel wants to be. Even, again, the Ukraine, which has been terrible to our people. We're sending them bulletproof ambulances and field hospitals, and we're doing all that we can for them because we have compassion, because we realize the sanctity of human life, whatever your country or political. Even Iran, after the earthquake that they had there, we wanted to send help. The Jewish people are a very special people. I'm proud to be part of them. I'm proud to have you, Shalom Pollack, on the show with us, and Rod as our producer, and all of you who are listening in. Thank you. Please write your comments at the end of the below this video that you're watching, and don't forget to subscribe, because you're not going to get programming like this in the wider stream. That it's not always politically correct, and many times we're censored. Many times we can't go up on certain channels or social medias because we are not afraid to cut to the truth here on Solomon's Sword. So again, thank you everyone for being with us. Thank you, Shalom Pollack, and have a happy Passover holiday.
Thank you for having me, and God bless.
Hey everyone, to make sure you can get access to all of our interviews, make sure to hit the subscribe button on both our YouTube and Rumble channels. Your click makes us all stronger. Thanks.